Here it is, the replacement intermediate pipe, all the way from Italy. And I must say, although it's second hand, it is in remarkably good condition. Comes with new seals and clamps. But the seller has done an exceptionally good job of cleaning this up, ready for resale. Although I must say there's a certain irony behind buying a British bike and having to get your parts from Italy. Now, let's just rest that back in here for a moment whilst we work on the battery tray. Well, we are getting there finally. The seat catch will wire in quite nicely, but it is now incredibly tight under here, and I've found that there's just nowhere for the wiring to go. You see, with the old battery tray, all the wiring ran in this little channel here. But the problem that we've got now is that to fit a bigger battery, Triumph basically took that space, and so now there appears to be nowhere for the wiring to go. I've solved some of it by taking the alarm unit, which is under here, rotating it 180 degrees, and instead of running the cables along the top there, I've run them along the bottom, and then this multi-plug here just slots into the front. So we're definitely getting there. I need to get the main connections wired in, need to find somewhere for my tether, but it is incredibly tight under here now. Well, it seemed like I was getting somewhere, but the main power cables, they're just so thick. In fact, all of the wiring was shaped in a certain way with bends here and there, and it was all shaped around the old battery and the old battery tray. It's proven rather difficult trying to get it to remold itself around the new battery, especially, as I say, the two main power cables. I found myself having to unravel a lot of the loom covering and reform the cabling where I need it to be now, and now it does finally seem like we're getting somewhere. Yeah, never did fit very well, that, even on the old one. Let's get the new, let's get the old lock tested. There we go. Excellent. Looks like we are now finally ready to move on to the exhaust. And prepping the exhaust for fitment was interesting. You see, the intermediate pipe fits over the top of the tail end of my header pipe, and in between the two is this metal mesh seal. Only when I took the intermediate pipe out, it left this seal behind, and it was in such bad condition that I had to basically hack it apart to get it off. It really was a representation of that saying where they say that sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. Even when I got the seal off, it still looked absolutely terrible around here, and it took a hell of a lot of cleaning to get the tail end of my header pipe into some sort of fit state to accept a new seal and intermediate pipe. But eventually we got to where we are now. So hopefully the seal, the pipe, hopefully it'll go on quite nicely. Admittedly, I've never used these before, so I don't actually know, does that go on there first, or does it go inside there first, or is it a little bit of both? I know which way around this goes, but let's see if we can get this pipe fitted. Now, before I finish fitting the exhaust, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to fit the tail tidy to the exhaust first. More on that in a minute. The tail tidy then, I have fully rebuilt it, repainted it. It's not a perfect job. It's good. It's 1,000 times better than it was before. But I'm convinced these tail tidies are powder coated in the factory. And to do it justice, I'd powder coat it again. But it'll do for now. I've also taken the opportunity of upgrading the indicators. You see, the Gen 1 indicators, there's nothing wrong with them. I'm just not really a fan. If originality was your thing, then of course you'd keep these. But I'm not about originality with this bike. I get enough of that with my 106 Quicksilver. And so because originality is not my thing with this bike, I figured let's go for a Gen 2 upgrade on the indicators whilst we've got the tail tidy off. Now, why am I fitting the tail tidy to the exhaust before fitting the exhaust? Well, when I removed the tail tidy from the exhaust, it kind of sprung off. And I noticed when I was checking the threads, 2 of them are fine. 2 of them were a little bit tight. So I've just had to run a thread chaser through these front ones here and check the bolts. They're all okay, but it seems to be fitted under some amount of pressure. So I figured actually, you know, rather than mess about with it and struggle with it while it's on the bike, let's see if I can fit the tail tidy to the exhaust first and then fit the whole thing onto the bike. That would have been a pig to do with this actually on the bike. Right, let's get this fitted. Right then, let's just make sure that everything still works. Right, tail light is on. Front brake, rear brake, indicators, left, right. Oh yeah, that's because I've got the fairing off, so that indicator is off at the minute. And now the pillion seat, which I'm still convinced doesn't fit properly. It's a Daytona thing, I'm sure it is. That is it. Even though it looks like it's not fitted, that is it. Well, I was going to say, let's get the fairing back on and go for a ride. But that sounds pretty bloody awful out there. So let's get the fairing back on and go for a ride tomorrow. Let's check them indicators again. Yes, that one's working properly now that the front one's plugged in. Excellent. we got tail light, brake light, number plate light. Let's give it a whirl. There's always a little bit of anxiety when you've been working on a vehicle and you take that vehicle out for the first time since working on it. There's always a little bit of anxiety, just in case something goes wrong. But Lauren here, she's doing perfectly well. She is riding exactly as I would expect her to ride, riding exactly as she did before we took her apart. She just happens to be starting a lot better as well. I did expect the exhaust to stink a little bit to start with, because of course I've been handling the exhaust components and I've had oily hands, and what normally happens in that situation is as soon as the exhaust warms up, the oil will burn off the exhaust. But I've actually not had any of that so far. Either the exhaust isn't hot enough, or all that stink is effectively behind me already. So now that she's up and running, I guess all that leaves is for me to go on a proper ride.